real estate is simple, right? If you need to make X amount of money, how many transactions does it take? What's my average commissions on that? And then you got to just go out there and grind. True wealth creation doesn't typically come from producing active income. It didn't come from like investing in real estate. Came from creating a real estate business.
That's step one, but if it ends there, you will not create wealth. What actually creates wealth is acquiring properties, but then running them like a business enterprise. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey. RP Elevate is around the corner. Make sure you get your early bird tickets. Early bird ends pretty soon, so check out rplevate.com. We have a top 5% global podcast. Thanks to you guys, the listeners, and thanks to our awesome guests, like today's guest, Nick Najar. You've probably heard that name. He is famous amongst Real Producers Publishers. One of, if not the most successful launch of all time within the first 5 launches of Real Producers back 8 years ago. Pretty incredible. Nick is a wealth of knowledge. I learned so much, and he's much taller than he looks on Zoom. Every time we have a conference, people are astounded at this very tall man. Nick, how's it going?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Nick, you're a friend. We vacation once or twice a year together. I know you really well. I've been wanting to get you on the show. I just think your business mind and the way you look at things is phenomenal. I actually wrote about you in my book. I quote one of your favorite quotes, which is now one of my favorite quotes, is "Don't let your emotions dictate the logic of the situation." You say that all the time. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Well, I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but a lot of times we let our emotions get in the way of what the reality is of the situation, right? In relating to sales, right? I remember with you specifically, I'm like, Remington, I haven't made a sale in like 3 months. This is after I was established, had a good business going. And you're like, well, how many appointments have you done? I'm like, a ton. And we looked at it, it was like 13. It's like very below average performance from a salesperson. So it's just like, if you expect results, like go back and reverse engineer those results. And a lot of times we just get in our own head emotionally, and that distracts us from the end goal.
Well, and that proved to be the winning formula for you because to date, I believe when I say most successful launch, essentially you look at 2 things. How long does it take to someone to get to print for a magazine? And how well are they doing financially in terms of revenue from the ad revenue? And so you were by far the fastest to launch at the time, but not only the fastest, launched with over $100,000 in residual profit for this magazine, which was just kind of unheard of. And since that time, there's only been one person, and the numbers aren't in yet officially. I got to figure this out because we had a lady out there in Montana who launched that, did it pretty quickly. But I mean, we've launched 130 of these things, and your numbers are still at the top. So obviously you figured out a way to do your business in a way that few have. And since that time has remained top 5 in the company, acquiring other publications as well. So what are the main things that you've learned over the time using that formula, like just not worried necessarily about how you feel about it, but logically looking at the numbers? How have you been able to duplicate that with the other magazines that you've purchased?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. I think really what it comes down to is what is the end goal, and then getting clarity around that end goal, and then getting committed to the end goal, and then just reverse engineering the process. So if real estate is simple, right? If you need to make X amount of money, how many transactions does it take? What's my average commissions on that? And then you got to just go out there and grind to get that stuff, right? You got to lead generate every day. You got to do all the things that everyone knows that's probably listening to this to be successful. It's just not there's a book by, I think it's Chet Holmes. It's The Ultimate Sales Machine. He talks about pig-headed discipline, right? It's like you don't really think about the work. You just do the work. You don't you don't take the distractions for what they are. You don't let your emotions get involved. You just simply say, look, my goal is to make 100 contacts a week, and you go out there and make 100 contacts a week. We can all make excuses around why we're not going to make 100 contacts a week. Really, really good excuses, right? But at the end of the day, the results are what they are. And most of the time, it just comes down to the activity will produce the results.
So you mentioned Chet Holmes. We actually had Amanda Holmes on the show as well. She revamped her father's book, a great episode there. Pig-headed discipline. So the emotions, what are the emotions that people typically experience when things aren't going their way? Is it just like we talk all the time how discipline trumps motivation. And I feel like one of the top emotions someone experiences that gets in the way of the work is just not feeling like doing the grunt work, not feeling like making the calls, especially in sales. Like if you have to make 100 calls, if you end at 50 because you just feel like it, you're going to get half the results that you want. But what are some of the other emotions that you feel like get in the way of people being successful? Because you've seen it all. You've seen who is successful, and you see people struggle to be successful.
It's so funny. I'm thinking about my children right now with emotions. I have 4 kids, 11 down to 4, and it's just like the emotions are off the charts, right? Especially for my 6-year-old. It's like he like my daughter like sits on him and like hurts his leg, and he's at the stage of his life where he's like screaming panic, right? So here's the thing, a good example, right? Fires happen in businesses, right? Situations happen. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to take care of this situation. Whereas most of the time we kind of go from the urgent and important, tasks, and we then just kind of shift down because it's easier to handle the not urgent and important tasks, right? So the urgent and important is to lead generate every single day. But that it's a lot easier to put out the fire, right? Because then you don't it's just easier, right? So it's like that shift and just really understanding those quadrants, like what's urgent, important, what's urgent, not important, what's not important, not urgent. It's amazing how much time we spend on the not important, not urgent tasks. That at the end of the day, nobody, there's a realtor in our market, Rob Shanks. Shout out to Rob. He's like, he literally doesn't even check his email. It's hilarious, because it's 99% of the time not urgent, not important, right? It's other people's agendas, like random stuff. So it's just like that relentless focus on what's important and what's urgent. And I think a lot of times too, thinking about emotions, you really got to tap into the emotions of the success and the outcome to get there, right? So it's like you've got these emotions that you got to really tap into, like Tony Robbins style, like really ingrain the emotions of what it feels like to be at that level that you want to be at. And that's what will kind of drive you. And then it's also pain and pleasure, right? The pain of not doing that, not hitting your financial goals, has to be greater than the pleasure of you being lazy and not doing the activities you want to do.
Man, that's so true about the fires too, because they're so shiny and distracting. And then the other thing about fires is you lie to yourself, telling yourself that this is important and that you need to take care of it. And if you don't, it will hurt you. And so by the end of the day, you don't feel great about the fact that you didn't make 100 calls like you said you would, but you lie to yourself saying, I had to do that. I had to put out that fire. And it's really funny, man. I think about this all the time. Like if I looked at a chart of the time that I spent doing certain things that at the end of the year, I wouldn't be proud of, like how many hours are you scrolling? How many hours are you watching TV? How many hours are you reading? How many hours are you spending with your kids? Like if you just charted it, I guarantee that every single one of us would probably shift something knowing how much time we're spending on that thing. And if you're talking about real estate, I'm guessing fires, like non-urgent fires, would be at the top of that list. You see that a lot with realtors. So, I mean, you've worked with the top 500 realtors in St. Louis and then 5 other states. Now, there's got to be a common theme between the ones at the top and the ones that don't make the list. And what's funny is every single year, I don't know about your markets, but it seems to be the trend that there's 100 to 200 new agents on our distribution list every single year. Why do you think that is?
Oh, That's a loaded question. Real quick, one last comment on what we were talking about earlier. Just a thought. I'm going through this strategic coach program with Dan Sullivan, author of Who Not How, 10x is easier than 2x, and I just recently did this activity inventory. It's something I recommend everyone do, probably at least like twice a year, once a quarter. Just make a list of all the activities that you're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and it's eye-opening. Those things you say, oh my gosh, I spent this much time on this, like, and it's amazing the time that we spent, not the time that we spend, but the energy suck. Like the stuff that we do, we don't want to be doing it, we don't have to be doing it, but it's draining our energy every single day. So the go back to your question though on the, it's really interesting, right? Real estate is a very interesting, business, and there's a lot of, I think the industry has been designed over the past, 2 decades, three, at least as long as I've been in it. We're like, it's a really good gig for somebody working part time, right? Like I think that's a lot of it, right? Is like these people get in there, they work it part time, but then they move on to greener pastures outside of the industry, or they decide that it's not worth the time they put in, or whatever. But it's really interesting. I think the amount of turnover and the amount of change that happens in the industry, and that's only obviously going to shift as we're all this new regulations are coming around how realtors get paid and that type of thing. I think it's just going to professionalize the industry and make this top 500 group much more successful in what they do.
So your argument is it's a good thing.
I don't know. I honestly don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I just think that the realtors that are going to be in the business are going to be forced to create a more professional experience for their clients, the same way an attorney, CPA would for their clients. And it's the people that provide the best professional services are going to make the most money. Whereas in the past, I feel like there was just a lot of part-time agents driving around town showing people houses, and it's just not, almost a counterproductive,
yeah. Well, I mean, good or bad, it's a hurdle nonetheless. And the successful people at the top handle hurdles differently than those that don't find success. And I think your take on it, which is just, okay, this is going to force us to put a more professional spin on it. It's going to force us to package things differently, and it's going to help us up our game. Let's use this opportunity for this hurdle. So I think that's how most people at the top are going to approach this. Speaking on the people that you're working with, the realtors that are in our distribution list, the people at the top, I find it funny that a lot of them aren't investing in real estate, that they aren't like using this knowledge that they have. Some of them don't even own their own homes, which is a whole other gig. But you're pretty heavily invested in real estate. I know that you're invested not only in homes, but obviously, or not obviously, but you're invested in mobile homes. And we've had a couple people on the show, Justin Donald, Frank Rolfe on the show in the past. But let's talk about this a little bit. Why do you feel like a lot of some agents get into real estate investing and some don't?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people, myself included, the first 2 decades really of my working career were just all about active income, creating income to live a lifestyle, feed my family, do all those things. And, I've been incredibly fortunate and blessed to have good friends like Justin Donald, who wrote the book Lifestyle Investor. You mentioned this on the podcast, and meet guys like Frank Rolfe, who is at one time was the largest private owner of real estate, still probably owns over $1 billion with a B of manufactured housing communities in the U.S. Right, but you look at what most people, and I knew this probably, my early 20s, true wealth creation doesn't typically come from producing active income. It comes from real estate, but a lot of people don't realize it comes from private enterprise and business, right? So you look at, some of the top most influential people in our market, this probably is the case across all markets across the U.S. they have a real business that's doing, you know, 20, 30 million of revenue, million, 2 million, 3 million of earnings. That's where true wealth creation happens, right? Like it's creating a business, creating an enterprise. But a lot of times we just get caught up in the rat race, right? To do the next deal, to do the grind, to do the next deal. And it's hard, right? It's really hard to bridge that gap. That's why most people live their lives, literally their entire working career, like working, and then they finally save enough money by the time they're 65 to retire. And
your argument to break it down is that wealth building is acquiring assets, but most people don't get to that point because when they start making money, the goal is to make more money, and they chase that dollar instead of making their money work for them.
Well, no, I don't think this all has to be an argument.
I'm not arguing. I'm clarifying.
No. I think two thoughts come to mind on that. One is it's all about cash flow, right? I didn't really realize that until probably 10, 15 years ago. Like creating cash flow, ideally passive cash flow, is where, true financial freedom comes from, right? So a lot of people just get caught up in the rat race, right? They want the next house. They want the fancy vacations and all that. And like Donald has done an amazing job just teaching that. Like, you can have all the lifestyle, accomplish all the dreams that you would want, but you got to get your bare minimum living expenses covered first. And you got to really, it's that the propensity to consume, right? The more money we make, the more we want to spend. So it's that discipline of just simply saving money, investing in things that produce passive income, like real estate, like you're talking about. That's really where true financial freedom comes from. But one thing I'll kind of add to that is wealth creation, though, actually comes from business, comes from enterprise. I kind of mentioned that earlier, but I was with a very successful advisor down in Texas last year, and he actually mentioned that to me. He's like, you look at the most wealthiest families in the world that are like self-created, it didn't come from like investing in real estate. It came from creating a real estate business, right? It's all about business enterprise that really creates wealth and financial freedom.
Well, that's what I was getting. That's where I was trying to go with earlier when I was saying the argument, because the argument is not necessarily that to get into real estate to create wealth, you buy homes and either, just to really break it down, get in the weeds, you create long-term rentals, short-term rentals, flips. And those are, three main avenues to acquiring dollars from investing in a house or some type of real estate. And what you're saying is that's step one, but if it ends there, you will not create wealth. What actually creates wealth is acquiring properties, but then running them like a business enterprise. And that's where a lot of people fail because they don't get to that point.
100%. Yeah. And getting in the weeds a little bit more, because I've, tried to ensure real estate investor. You break down real estate, you got single family housing, which wasn't an asset class before, right? But that is a true institutional asset class now. You mentioned that there's a couple different ways you can make money doing that: flipping houses, buying and holding, subject to, all kinds of ways people are making money off of single family investments. But then you got, in my opinion, what is easier to scale, right? Mobile home parks, RV parks, industrial outdoor storage, these things where a lot of people feel like, oh, well, I don't have the money to buy a mobile home park, or I don't have the resources to do this, where in reality, the money isn't what's holding you back. It's you can go out and raise money all day if you can get a good return for your investors. So that's where, but really, again, just to kind of maybe solidify, it comes from creating a real estate business. It's not from buying the next house. So if you're going to buy the next house, really know what your end goal is. Hey, my goal is to produce $5,000 in monthly income off of my investments, and then reverse engineer and figure out how many actually single family houses you have to buy to produce that income. And that's where the real results come from.
So the barrier to entry is money in some in many people's minds. I don't have enough money to invest. Let me ask you your thoughts on this, because one avenue would be like, if you went the Dave Ramsey route, he would basically say, don't do anything until you have the cash to pay for it. If you went the opposite route, it's like, do I have enough money to at least get a loan and put the money down? You mentioned another option altogether, which is raising the cash to other people and promise them returns on their investing. I guess what would be your overall response to someone whose main reason for not getting into real estate is they don't feel like they have enough money? Even another option is partial dollars going into like a return where you don't own it, you own part of a property, and you're, promised a 3-year return, like those kinds of things. What's your argument for someone getting in? Like, do they just need to get in somehow, or what's the smartest way to do this?
Man, that's a really good question. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think that everyone has their own unique investor DNA. So one of my partners has 2 properties, owned free and clear, no debt, right? That's in his DNA. He doesn't want to, take on more debt. He's happy with that. Probably leaving 7 figures of income on the table. If he ever wanted to, get a bank loan on that, he could cash that out tomorrow. I think that it really just depends on, are you looking for active income or passive income? A lot of people think if I invest in an Airbnb unit, that's going to create passive income. But they don't realize, like, you actually then have to hire a management company if you don't want to do it. And there's a lot of work that's involved really with any business, right? There's no true, passive business, no absentee owner business, unless you're investing in a real estate fund, as an example, that you're going to get a 5 to 10% preferred payment, that quote unquote mailbox money each quarter. But a lot of people, don't have the cash to do that. So you really just got to figure out what the path is that you want to use. What vehicle do you want to use to create that extra income? That makes sense?
It does. I'm curious. So with that knowledge of what you just said, you seem very well versed into all the different places you could put your money when it comes to real estate. And you personally have chosen the mobile home route for the majority of your dollars. Without getting into, the complete breakdown of that, I am curious as to the decision of, like, that's where you chose to put your money. Why was that exciting to you?
Yeah. So just to be clear, it's investing in manufactured home communities. We don't really like to own the homes because that's like a rental business. When you own these manufactured homes, they're hard to maintain and upkeep and that type of thing. But for me, I just looked at, like, okay, I decided I was going to choose an asset class. So I think that if somebody's like, yeah, I'm going to do the fix and flip, and then I'm going to do the subject too, and I'm going to go buy this multifamily, like, you really just need to master your own asset class that you want to, learn. So a lot of people will listen to bigger podcasts, study, talk to experts, figure that out. And I think that's great. But I personally just chose to pick one, and I won't invest in anything active like that I'm going to spend my brain space on if it's not a mobile home park in that asset class, right? So that's just kind of why I choose that. So why affordable housing is an all-time high? They're not building more parks. It's kind of like Bitcoin, right? They're not building new parks. So there's a finite amount of these affordable housing opportunities. They're not subsidized by the government. So it's just a really, in my opinion, really, really viable option for providing housing for lower income households in the U.S. And that's something I'm really passionate about, is providing clean, safe, and affordable housing.
You've done a lot of deals. How many have you counted up how many deals you've done just in all the different buckets that you have?
Over 30, less than 50.
Okay. So that's just in parks?
Over 30 mobile home park transactions.
That's insane. So, which represents, hundreds of homes. So the question I have for you, and I want you to take a second to think about this, because, and I'll give you some time to think about it as I explain mine. I want to know, one of the biggest pain points you've had in growing this business and the lesson you've learned from that. And while I give you time to think about that, I'll tell you mine. So I started investing. I do single family homes, and I invested up north in Indiana, and I got to 3 or 4 properties and could justify in my head a property management. So I'm hands off. I've got this one property in Indianapolis, and I chose to manage it myself, specifically on Airbnb and short-term rental websites, because I'm thinking to myself, I can just respond to these. You know, I'm not doing enough other things in my businesses. I've got time to respond. And dude, I remember where I was. I think I've told you this. I was on Instagram and I saw a picture of the CEO of Airbnb with Zac Efron in the Greek island, the Mykonos Islands, and it just hit me. The picture hit me with a ton of bricks, and I realized I was on my honeymoon in the Greek Isles, Santorini last year, and I also checked my emails. But when I was checking my emails, I was answering Joe Schmo 89 on why there was a bug in the bathroom and if he could get $100 discount or his money back. And I'm just beating my head against the wall. All the things that I say I don't do, which is spend time on these investments. I have it passive. But in my mind, I couldn't justify a management company to take $1 when I could just do it. But I realized after a year of doing it myself, I have no desire to answer another one of those emails, even if it means buying back my time on that. So that was a lesson that I kind of knew was coming my way. I knew I was going to learn that. But it just completely solidified that I want to be hands off with this. So do you have any lesson from the years of you doing this 30 plus deals? What's one of the biggest lessons you've learned?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the same lessons that a top residential real estate agent that's on our distribution list or listens to podcasts would experience. It's the same thing any of our franchise owners would experience, or really any business owner. It's people, it's issues, right? It's challenges that come with scaling growth, right? So for me, I also think though it is really important that we kind of figure out on our own, right? What you did actually probably was actually more beneficial long term than you think, because now you understand the pain, you understand the suck of what these people that you're hiring to do are dealing with every single day, right? So you can be more empathetic to them and the situations they're running into. So for residential real estate agents, it's okay, you can typically only do about 3 to 6 transactions a month before you have to hire somebody, transaction coordinator, buyer's agent, something like that, right? But then once you get to that, 7 to 15 million a year range, you got another set of problems and challenges, right? So then you get here, then you got another set of problems and challenges. So what I experienced when I, bought my first 2 mobile home parks, I can handle that. I got a little admin staff dealing with my property manager, no big deal. Then we got 4 and 5, and it's oh, this is really I didn't sign up for this. Our issues, by the way, our issues list, we run the EOS model, which I highly recommend. Traction. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. But you got your issues list, and the issues that we deal with in the mobile home park business are absolutely insane. Just mind-boggling when you really look at it. But we started running those issues lists. Now we know okay, we're getting more traction with the issues versus just being an absolute cluster of a situation all the time, right? So the problems are always people problems, but what I've learned is to just kind of inspect what we expect, right? So a lot of times I personally and many people get frustrated with people. We actually just haven't set clear expectations for them. We haven't really trained them up to properly handle the issues or figure out what needs to get done. And then we get frustrated with that. So but the core, challenge is people. I think that's the hardest in any business.
But it's also why we do it, to impact people. And that's a great transition for where I wanted to go with you last, is just your decision to double down with Real Producers franchise. You've obviously, like I said before, you're a wealth of knowledge within real estate. You've acquired way more knowledge in the last 10 years as you've doubled down in real estate investing. But during that time, you acquired more Real Producers franchises. And I'm just curious if if you can articulate for the realtors and vendors that are listening, kind of your thoughts and passion around what we're doing at Real Producers, building this community.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember when we were at a conference, not a real. This is when we were both selling knives together, selling closing gifts to realtors. We're at a conference. This is, I believe, a January conference, right before you were going to print. Like, you're like, you show me this magazine. You're like, I've got this idea. I'm gonna start doing a magazine on top of the crazy events I'm doing. So, I'm sure you've mentioned on the podcast before, but like the crazy events, like giving away turkeys, and the funniest one is the fish. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, you did what? Like, we give away like 100 goldfish. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right? So, just crazy stuff to get top agents in the room, which is the ultimate goal, right? I'm like, anyway, you have this magazine idea, and you're like, hey man, like I'm got this idea. I don't know if I'm going to partner with N2 Publishing or do it myself. And you're like, you should do it with me. I'm like, no, thank you. You go figure it out. Let me know. So here we are, literally 8 months later, and you're like, you figured it out, right? And I remember, like, probably around a year after that, we had been talking, and then it was something that you guys proved in 4 markets internally with the N2 brand. And then you're like, look, we have the concept. We're going to scale this up and grow it. So there's a lot of reasons I love what we do, but I think there's a huge gap around education, knowledge. A lot of these big industries that, like, NAR is a big controversial thing right now. Like, there really isn't a ton of value in that, right? And this is my, biased opinion, right?
Dropping bombs.
We have a tremendous value with connecting, elevating, inspiring top producing realtors to bridge the gap between the realtor and the vendor, right? To really create relationships, not transactions. And all the things that we do every single weekday, month to produce high quality events, to produce a high quality magazine, to bridge connections. I mean, if we made a list, the amount of personal connections that our publishers make, realtors to vendors. So realtor says, hey, I really need a good painter in my network. I really need a good roofer that I can refer to my clients, like trusted, reliable vendors. Like, we're talking in the millions, right? At this point that we've created these connections. And that's what's exciting, to me. And then, thinking about why we've grown and how we've grown, I can't, be on this podcast without attributing, a lot of our success to Diane Collins, our lead operator. Like, if she was not in the picture, we would have 1 magazine, maybe 2, right? Like, there's just no way that we could scale up and grow without key people like her to lead the organization. I mean, she truly, creates amazing opportunity for our individual franchises, for herself, for me and my family. Like, I have a very beautiful business thanks to her. So
Diane is good people. Shout out to Diane running the ship. Last question. We're running this event, as you know, RP Elevate, coming in September, keynote speakers, real estate panels. You mentioned that you and I were talking at a conference. We've been going to conferences. We've been vacationing and conferencing together for 15 years now. But we continue to do it. We continue to go to these conferences. I love it. I know you do too. What are you looking forward to for this particular conference, RP Elevate, in September?
Ooh, well, the vision coming to reality. I mean, you've had this vision since probably before you even started this thing, right? And then, COVID, that good old, COVID kind of put a year or 2 hiatus on this event, right? But I'm actually, everything happens for a reason, right? And I think at the end of the day, our businesses will only grow to the amount that we commit to growing ourselves personally and professionally. So this is just a vehicle for top agents to really be able to surround themselves with the right people, to be in the room. The speakers that we have on the docket are incredible. The amount of connections and collaboration that are going to happen in this event are going to be life-changing for a lot of different people.
I love it. Nick, thanks for being on the show. I always love having our own people. This is just, honestly, some of the most impressive people in real estate have Real Producers franchise, and you are definitely one of those people. So thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap. If you want to influence who we have on the show or what we talk about, email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. Check out rplevate.com. Get your early bird tickets now. We'll see you in September.